Before I get any of my tackle ready, the first and foremost is getting my ground bait sorted. For down the edge and for my method feeder, I want my ground bait to be ready when the match has started. Right consistency, so I could only need to fine tune it throughout the progression of the match. I use two different mixers for the margin and the method. I suppose they're the same really, but all I do when I'm margin fishing, I like to use brown crumb. So for the method feeder, I use Dynamite milled expander ground bait, marine halibut, and green swim stim. I'd say these two are I use this for all my commercial fishing, whether I'm margin fishing or method feeder work. Whatever ground bait that coincides with commercial fishing for carp and skimmers, I use these two. They're absolutely brilliant. The marine halibut's quite a heavy mixer. It adds a lot of base to your mix and density. And to me, the green, a main reason why I use it, not just because of its amino acid attractants in it, it ends up blending your ground bait to the colour of the water. A lot of the commercials nowadays, they're an algae green colour, as you can see, like a dark green colour. Dark green, dark brown, that's the colour of the ground bait I always try to get to. However, recently I've been using a milled expander. It's a very fine, fluffy ground bait, and I've just had some really good results with it. And a lot of ground baits is a confidence thing. And since I've been using the milled expander, I've won quite a lot of matches with it. So to me, it's become part of my main armoury when it comes to mixing a ground bait. So those 3 bags, equal quantities. I'll show you how I do it. It's quite simple, really. And then for my margin, I use exactly the same mix and just with some brown crumb, basically just to bulk it out. At the end of the day, the fish are coming down the margins to feed, no other reason. So you don't have to spend an awful lot of money on high quality ground baits. The principle is they're coming down the margins for food. As long as you're using a fish meal based ground bait along with a bit of brown crumb, to me that's all that matters. So of course I'm going to mix my ground bait up separately. For the method feed, you don't want to add brown crumb because brown crumb obviously contains a lot of bread and it makes your ground bait really spongy. You don't want that. You want a dense mix, so when you're compacting your method feeder, it's compact and it doesn't break down as quick. So to start off with, the method feeder, equal quantities of all 3 ground baits. Like so, into a bucket. Give it a good shake around. Now, you see a lot of people, especially on commercials, using a drill. I'm a big believer in being as quiet as possible, really, when it comes to mixing ground bait. Fish respond to vibration so much. That's why your peg usually gets stronger as the match progresses, simply because they get used to you sat there being nice and quiet. I don't think it's actually people moving around you that makes a difference. I think it's the movement on the ground that causes vibration through the water. And I can't think of anything worse than deter a fish from feeding than getting a power drill out and mixing your ground bait up with a drill. So I like to use my hands whenever possible. So mix your ground bait up, and that's the finished product. You can see quite a dark green, and of course it will go even a bit darker when we add water to it, which is more or less the same colour as the water. It's more like a camouflage for the fish to feel safe to feed over. You know, there's a lot of people that might use a contrast colour, you know, like a yellow or a red. But to me, I want a bait that the fish feels safe to graze over. A bit of water. Now, your first bit of water is quite important. I always like to add more water than I need to. And this is why I do it at the start of the session before I get anything ready. So you can see quite a lot of water in there. Mix it around nice and evenly. And as you can see now, it's quite stodgy. I'm going to leave that now, and whilst I'm getting the rest of my stuff ready, that water, the ground bait's going to absorb that moisture, and maybe in about 10 minutes time it'll start drying out, and then I'll riddle it. And you'll find just by adding that amount of water in one go means I don't have to keep adding bits of water to it all the time whilst I'm getting ready. That will be more or less the finished product after I've riddled it before the start of the match. So that's my method mix. Again, for down the margins, equal quantities with a good helping of brown crumb. So if we just put the method mix into there, always use a big bucket to mix your ground bait with, which means you can get your mix evenly mixed up. So into a big bucket like that. If you want to, I put a lid on sometimes and give it a really good shake, just so it mixes more evenly. Now, because I've added brown crumb, it's gone a darker brown more than a green. To me, I don't think it matters. You know, as long as it's a dark colour, whether it's green or dark brown, they're the two colours I look for. Add some water, and again, I want to over wet it, so I'm not messing about whilst I'm preparing, having to add water to it all the time. You see, quite a decent amount of water. Get it all off the sides, and again, quite a stodgy mix. Right, that's my ground bait sorted. Of course, if it's a damp day and it's raining, always bring with you a lid and some towels to cover over your ground bait, because you don't want any more moisture getting into your ground bait whilst you're preparing. You're just going to affect the texture of your mix. Right, so the ground bait. We've let that rest for about 20 minutes now, and it's just right. All I need to do is riddle it. Push all these lumps through that contain more moisture. And that's my method mix. Just the right consistency, as you can see, so it just breaks down as well when I squeeze it and then separate the ground bait. You don't want it too wet for the method feed, you want it quite dry. If you make it too wet, you end up where you find that the actual mix sticks in the mould a lot. This is my ground bait for the margins. And that's it. All I like to do for my method mix is put it into a container like that with a lid on. Scoop some ground bait up, and that's on my side tray. So as soon as I've actually filled my method feeder mould up, I can just flip that lid over, stops it drying out, and especially if it's a damp day, stops it getting wet. The rest of the mix I like to keep in a bucket like this, that's watertight. And again, put a towel over the top of it